probably very differently than what you thought originally, and it's very, very nice to have the exchange.
The symbol is located somewhere over here.
You never know where the innovation is going to come from.
We have specific objectives in Horizon 2020 about focus and pace as well, about the speed of bringing solutions to the market, generating that economic benefit and the growth and the jobs.
The European funding was absolutely essential for this project because it's a groundbreaking project, it's blue sky research, and that would not have been possible without European funding.
We want to include all the kids that normally are excluded, and we want to empower them to become creators instead of just being consumers. And this award allows us to reach more kids. It's a marketing instrument for us.
We're in the second year of a 3-year project, and now is the time to really start thinking about how we take this forward beyond the end of a project in a year's time. You know, do we present it forward commercially? Do we charge people for it? Do we use crowdfunding? Is it a social benefit?
First of all, internet, that's for sure. The Internet of Things, collaboration on internet, working on internet, that's for sure, but also the new frontiers of science. So it's a long list, but I would say all with the same fil rouge, which is European innovation and really leading in the world.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Giovanni CARRADA. I work for RAI, Italy's public television. I'm afraid I will not be as professional as Katrina was this morning, but I'm not a presenter, a professional presenter. I'm just a science writer. Today, this afternoon, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, the European way. We've seen this technology going from a backwater of research, which was largely confined mostly to science fiction for decades, and then very rapidly becoming a key enabling technology, a strategic technology. We'll talk about the strategy that the European Commission has prepared to let Europe be as competitive as the other protagonists on the global scene, namely the United States and China, and how to make sure that artificial intelligence will be developed for good and for all. So we'll first have two speakers, and then a very interesting panel discussions. The first thing, we'll be watching a short video. Before launching the short video, I would like you to invite to use your Slido application and prepare your questions for the panelists. And then when we'll have the panel, your questions will be put to the panelists, and I hope we will have a very interesting discussion. The topic is very exciting. I hope it is exciting enough for this post-lunch session. Thank you very much. The video, please. Very well. So I invite the first speaker, Dr. Khalil Rouhana, who is the Deputy Director General of DigiConnect, will tell us about the European strategy. What is the European way?
Thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good day for those of you who were here this morning. Yes, artificial intelligence. For this stakeholder community, we all know, the mountain, uphill, downhill development of artificial intelligence, and the hype days of the past, and then the winter period. But today, AI is there to stay with us. I'd say AI is the normal development, natural development of digital systems as we get them to be smarter and as we embed smart systems in all types of artifacts, products, services, make them more autonomous and bringing us additional functionalities, additional security, additional safety. I don't need to tell you how important is the subject for the development of the economy and society of the future. And AI is not only about the algorithms, deep learning, extremely important, but AI is all about the digital supply chain or digital technology chain that enables AI to develop. And we know that it has influence now from the components, which are more development on making components more specific to AI, up to the software, embedded software, up to the computing, data infrastructure, but also, of course, all the applications that come with it on the web. The European approach to AI is the one we announced after long consultations with you, with the member states, is in line with the way Europe does things. And there is one thing we could say about Europe and its image worldwide, reflected in the way we do policy, the way we do politics, the way we do products, we do services. It's the biggest value is the trust that we need to bring into the technology, and building an AI that safeguards our human dignity, safeguards transparency, safeguards democracy, and an AI that is for all. And that's what guided us in the development of the AI strategy that we announced after this consultation in April last year, and on which we had, with all member states, that with their representatives, their ministers, agreed that we need to work on together. An AI with the benefits coming to all our businesses and the benefits coming to all our citizens, and an AI that brings our society all together a step forward. This is what you see in our strategy, and that's the European way. And for that, we did propose 3 pillars of actions that we think are extremely important. These 3 pillars, we've been developing them in 2 tracks since April last year. We have set up a group of member states at Director General's level and the ministries responsible for AI development. And we work together with all member states to have what we call a coordinated action plan for all of Europe, where we know what to be done at member states level, what to be done at EU level, what to be done with the private sector, how to stimulate public-private partnerships, how to work together in areas where we need critical mass of investments, where we need to act together to ensure the widespread of the benefits of AI across the whole society. That action plan, I will not say too much about it. It will be announced on Friday, so keep tuned to see what's coming. But I could tell you the ideas that we have developed, and we'll not go into too much details in any case we don't have time for that. And that's one track. The other track, extremely important also, is the high-level expert group on AI that we have set up from April on, and it's 52 high-level experts that were selected and brought together with the chairmanship of PICA, Alla Pietila, we've seen this morning. And the expert group, you will have half of our panel, if not more, from the expert group who will be with us this afternoon on the panel here, has worked on guidelines and recommendations with one deliverable that's extremely important for us, which is an ethical guidelines that we would like to share with the larger community. They will come up with a draft by the end of the year, so in the coming days. And that draft for ethical guidelines will be put on the web for consultation, and we have set up a big alliance around this group, the AI Alliance. We have more than 4,000 people who have expressed their views so far to be part of that alliance, to comment on this draft guidelines. And after that, we will consolidate this, and we would like, from the Commission side and the Member States, to look at how we can make these guidelines a reality and in practice. That's one deliverer coming out of this expert group, But there is another deliverable, which are recommendations on general policy issues that we are taking. We have been following this through the development, and we're taking them and embedding them into the coordinated action plan as we move. This is what we've been doing since April. A Commission's proposal, strategy, an agreement with all member states to work together, a group of member states to work together for a coordinated action plan that is coming now, and a high-level expert group from industry, from academia, from the user side, mainly with civil society, with organizations representing consumers, all part of this group. And we have the supply industry, we have the user industry that is working on this. Now, the main pillars of the strategy have been developing together with the two tracks. A pillar on reinforcing our technology industrial capacity. We do believe that if Europe doesn't have a strong research community, a strong technology presence, if we don't have the strong industry in artificial intelligence and its use, we will not be able to shape its development. If you want to have a word to say on how the technology will be developed, how its benefit can be reached in every business, every citizen, you have to have a knowledge of the AI, and you have to have a strong industry in this field. Pillar on technology industrial capacity with three main, I would say, lines of action. One line on our scientific excellence, a second line on scientific and technological excellence. It's about supporting and consolidating research innovation effort, building more collaboration between industry and academia, building common roadmaps across Europe how to move forward. And we count on the partnerships that we have. We have a partnership in robotics, we have a partnership in big data. And by the way, tomorrow morning, they will be signing a memorandum of understanding to work together on a common agenda, because this is what we think is extremely important for the future. This is tomorrow, 8:30, for those of you who are interested to come and see what's happening with these two PPPs. Partnership, reinforcing our excellence, but also investing in testing and experimentation. Extremely important, as we mentioned this morning, we want Europe to be the world reference sites in Europe on testing and experimentation AI in all areas, from health, AI for health, to AI for mobility, to AI for energy, to AI for agriculture, to AI for manufacturing. We would like to have this in Europe the best. And the third item there is about data and our capacities to make AI a reality. And we know that we have a weakness in Europe in data and in access to data, and we have a set of actions there to make sure that at least public sector data that is very, very important, very accurate, and that could be shared and used by businesses to make AI applications, new products, new services. We propose for this pillar to invest close to 500 million euros from the EU budget for the next 3 years. 500 million euro per year, and we're doing that. I just checked the work program for 2020 and looked at the areas that we'll be covering there, and I could tell you there are more than 50% of the 1 billion euro that we have that will go to artificial intelligence. So we'll be delivering on what we promised at EU level, 3 years. But we would like the partnerships, the work that we're doing with the member states to also leverage this amount and get between now and 2020, close to 20 billion euros of investments altogether in AI. We see it's deliverable, it is feasible, and we're working to make it happen. But after 2020, we propose also to have an investment in AI that is in line with our ambition to get the 20 billion, not over 3 years, but to get a 20 billion euro of investments every year in Europe on artificial intelligence. And we propose artificial intelligence to be a key part of our Digital Europe program, to build the capacities, build the data sets, build the world reference testing sites. AI is a big ticket, is one of the 5 big tickets of digital in Horizon Europe. With both, we would have from the EU side put what is needed, we think, to leverage the necessary private and public investment from the member states to reach these amounts. This is our first pillar. You see, very ambitious. Very ambitious. You have more details on how this will be implemented in our coordinated action plan that will be delivered on Friday. Second pillar, skills, resources, accompanying our workers, because digital transformation and AI-enabled transformation will have major impact on the work, on the workforce, and on the way we live on the site in general. So a lot of emphasis on education, digital skills to come in the second pillar, and will be developed together. For that, we have proposed a scheme, as I mentioned this morning, on Digital Europe program for dedicated skills to AI to make sure that we have them in Europe. And the third pillar is on ethical and legal framework that we need to adapt in order to make sure that we have the best framework in Europe for the development of an AI that is secure, that is trustful, and that is in line with the aspirations of all our citizens. That's the Europe approach to AI, and that's what we want to build together. Just to tell you that it would be good that you keep tuned, and your input on the recommendation will come from the high-level expert group are extremely important to make sure that we together engage into a bright future with artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward to know the details the next Friday. I will inviting here the second speaker, Dr. Mabido Yoshida, Director General of the Global Strategy Bureau, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications of the Government of Japan. Please. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my utmost pleasure to be invited to this conference where we have people concerned on AI policy from both the European public sector and the private sector. I sincerely thank the European Commission and the Australian Presidency of the Council of the European Union for hosting this event. I am genuinely pleased to discuss AI policy with you all, including our wonderful speakers. Today, I would like to share 3 perspectives with you. First, the experience, the expectations and the concerns surrounding AI. Second, Japan's AI policy. And finally, the vision of global discussions. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that Japan believes AI will bring great benefits to our society. Products and services for consumers utilizing AI have started to penetrate into our everyday life in Japan as well as in other countries. I myself also enjoy services utilizing AI and taking advantage of their convenience. As AI becomes more and more popular, one AI system will be connected to other AI systems through the internet. Then, networked AI systems will be an emerging trend in the near future. Such networked AI systems will bring tremendous amounts of benefit to our society and economy compared to just a single AI system. On the other hand, there are various risks in putting AI into practical use. For instance, some concerns that we might lose control over AI. Others point out that decisions made by AI could have a negative impact on the lives, bodies, freedom, privacy, or property of AI users or others. In addition, there would be negative impacts on society if the profits generated by AI were concentrated on particular people. While tackling is reducing the risks or negative impacts of AI is important. Also, the Japanese government consider that business and technology innovation should not be hindered by focusing too much on the negative aspects. For instance, some people emphasize the concern that AI will deprive jobs from human beings and unemployment rate will increase. However, we have to discuss whether this presumption is really correct or not. In fact, we, the Japanese government, have a slightly different view from those who have such concerns under the situation of big challenges. As you may know, Japan faces serious challenges of declining population and labor shortage caused by low birth rate and aging populations. So we consider that the spread of AI does not deprive people of jobs, but rather it mitigates the negative impacts from labor shortage problems and dramatically improves the productivity of our economy. AI leads us to achieve sustainable development of the socioeconomy rather than a job destroyer. Currently, Japan is discussing a comprehensive national strategy on AI across the governmental agencies in order to solve various challenges we face, to achieve a society which encloses social diversity and to enable sustainable development. We believe we can achieve this vision by activity utilizing cutting-edge ICT such as AI. In this discussion, Japanese government is planning to put importance on 3 core pillars. The first is drastic enrichment of education. Placed at the core data science, coaching in addition to so-called STEM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. The second is investment on advanced researches and development, such as the next generation AI technology. The third is promoting social implementation. MIC puts importance on the view of how we can make good use of AI in real society, and we are undertaking concrete efforts. The AI policies have to be, however, essentially global because, as I have been mentioning, AI is being networked in cyberspace, and its effects cross national borders. AI is networked in the cyberspace, and its impacts easily cross national borders. Therefore, we have to discuss on AI policy from a global perspective with other governments and the various stakeholders. In order to do so effectively, we need principles or common understandings that all stakeholders can share as the basis of AI policy discussions. Based on this understanding, MIC proposed to the international community in July 2017 a policy study document, Draft AI around the guidelines for international discussions, which includes AI around the principles. In addition, we have proposed this July a report which includes draft AI utilization principles that focuses on utilization of AI. Similar initiatives to create principles for discussions on AI has been progressed globally. On the government side, discussions on AI started at the G7 Takamatsu ICT ministers meeting. After that, G7 member governments kept this momentum going at the Turin meeting last year and the Montreal meeting this year. On the other hand, in the private sector, various international forums, such as Partnership on AI Initiative, IEEE, and others are discussing this matter. Also, some individual companies have published their own AI development principles. In order to advance the discussion on this wide and deep theme in the right direction, we need inputs from both government and private perspective like today's forum, rather than just from one side. From this point, I hear that the discussions are led by multi-stakeholders also here in Europe, in the European AI Alliance. Also, the OECD has started AI discussion since last year. In addition, our colleagues in the Canadian government will host the G7 multi-stakeholders meeting on AI this week. I consider these activities quite desirable. As you know, Japan will host the G20 ministerial meeting on the trade and digital economy in the coming June 2019. Needless to say, one of the main topics in this meeting would be AI. Japan needs input not only from the government, but also from the private sector, including you gathered here, so as to achieve fruitful results in the meeting. In order to gather various inputs, Japan will hold G20 multi-stakeholders meetings and integrate Japan's views. I really hope to hear opinions from you here as well. I would like to once again thank the European Commission and Australian Presidency of the Council of the European Union for inviting me to the excellent opportunity today. AI is extremely beneficial to our society, and the Japanese government will mobilize various policies with big expectations on its development. And we need global cooperation for AI to strongly develop in the right direction. Our country is looking forward to cooperating with you here. Thank you for your kind attention. I now wish you all a splendid time at this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now is the time to discuss more depth what the European way to develop artificial intelligence might look like. And so we'll do this with our panelists. I'm inviting to join me here on the stage, Kathleen Müller. Let's welcome Kathleen, the president of the Dutch Alliance for Artificial Intelligence. Sabine Kotzegi, professor of labor science and organization at the Vienna University of Technology. Cecilia BONEFELD-DAHL, director general of Digital Europe, which is the association for the digital technology industry in Europe. Barry O'Sullivan from University College Cork, very successful research scientist and entrepreneur. Petra Schmack, entrepreneur and science and artificial intelligence popularizer. Patrick Galletier, research manager at THALES, France. You know that is a global aerospace industry. Well, just let me get my... Please, have a seat. Well, we heard a very interesting introduction to the European strategy, but what might it look like? So, first of all, we have seen that Europe is in competition mainly with, we heard it more than once this morning, with the US, with China, who are today's leaders in artificial intelligence. And both countries are somehow a top-down approach, one through its big tech companies, the other through the state and its big tech companies, while Europe's ambition is to have a more shared vision of artificial intelligence. So, Kathleen Müller, what might this European way look like, seen through the eyes of the citizens?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I think that Europe is on the path of getting into global pole position in establishing a right framework for responsible AI. The fact that the European Commission is approaching this from all angles, from the investment angle, the competition angle, the legal angle, the ethical angle, but also the social angle, makes that there is a true vision to do this right. And that is important because in 2014, a girl was arrested in the United States for stealing a bike. And at the police station, she was flagged being a high risk to ever commit a crime again. She had never committed a crime before and never committed a crime again after. She was held in jail, not let out on bail, and she was black. And around the same time, a guy was arrested for shoplifting. And he was a seasoned criminal, and he had a long record. He was flagged as someone with a low risk of ever committing a crime again. He was let out on jail, committed a crime almost immediately after, and is now serving a long sentence. He was white. And that shows that the technology, that the AI and the data that is being used to train it is not inherently neutral. It can be messy, it can be biased, and that is why we need to take care of that, and that is what Europe is doing, be it through guidelines, ethical guidelines, regulation, be it through standards. And that's why we also need more people at the table, because let's face it, if you are developing something that's going to potentially send somebody to prison, you might want to talk to a judge and ask that judge, what can I make? What can I develop that makes your job a better job, that makes your decisions better decisions, and let's make that together. And I think that the fact that Europe has taken up these examples where it goes wrong, or it goes not quite in the direction that we anticipated, and takes that seriously, with these ethical guidelines, with looking at the socioeconomic impact of it, with looking at the legal implications, Europe really has taken pole position in developing responsible AI.
Could you give us an example of what, not just of what might go wrong, for example, in the case of the girl who was arrested, but what kind of measures could be taken to ensure, for example, that the data that go into the AI decision-making is fair, for example? Can you give us an example?
I think that we could strive for high-quality data sets. I call that data optimization, like we do with seeds. I mean, we can make the data better. We can see there are projects out there that are really already working on optimizing the data and getting the bias out of it. But also, we have to think about which decisions, at what level, and with what kind of impact do we leave to the machines? When do we decide to use the machine? When do we, for example, if a decision has a very, very strong impact on our lives, because these machines don't only affect prison populations or potential criminals, but they're also used to decide whether we get a loan or a mortgage or whether our kids get into a certain school. We can decide to what extent we use these decisions and to what use these machines to make these decisions, to what extent we say, well, here, because the impact is so great, we want human intervention. And that even makes it more important that the algorithms that are used for it do not remain black boxes, that they can be explained. They don't have to be opened. I don't want to see the algorithm. I wouldn't understand it, but it can be made explainable. And that is what we should strive for.
But do you think we will going to need someday an authority, some public body that has the ability to look into the algorithm and look into the data that went into a decision so that can give citizen organizations an idea of how fair the decision by the machine was being?
That is of course a difficult question, and also requires, I think, a political answer. It depends on what the AI systems is being used for. We have to think about whether we should have a public authority to do that. On the other hand, there's already a lot of work being done on standards for AI. There are several standardization, the official ones and the company-led or the industry ones are working on standards. So there's a lot of activity now on trying to come up with ways in which we can make sure that this is done right. I wouldn't have the answer right now if there should be a public authority for all the algorithms to scrutinize them and test them. We might for some, and for others we might say, well, this is very basic and we don't need scrutinization of that. But that is going to depend on the sector, it's going to depend on where it's used. It's not an easy answer.
Yes, I guess so. Sabine Kosegi, we've just seen how citizens can be safeguarded when an AI-made decision regards them. So this also requires at least a basic level of skills in the population. It is needed to know their rights, but also to participate in an AI-enabled economy, and it is even more necessary in order to help develop new applications, the new science. This morning, in the discussions this morning, there was a lot of talking about the skills gap. We had seen that the audience, the number one interest was education. So where are we now? Where is Europe now as far as the skills gap is concerned?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Yes, indeed, the citizens of Europe have been identified by us as a major target group for education, you're right. So we think that every citizen should be able to exercise individual and collective autonomy and free will to keep control over his or her own life and work. And so therefore we need to educate citizens about the challenges and the potentials of AI technology. I think the technology is in the public sometimes overestimated in some areas and sometimes very much underestimated in other areas. And so we need to educate people there. That's very, very important. It's a complex topic, and I see in our high-level expert group a lot of dispute among experts about, for instance, definitions of AI and its potentials and its consequences, and particularly, as my predecessor said already, the social, cultural consequences of AI technologies are not well understood. So we also identified other target groups, and that is mentioned already before with regards to the skills gap. And the recent studies, like for instance of the McKinsey Global Institute, show that the skills gap is named by at least every second company as inhibiting innovation and economic growth already. And so we see a huge gap in AI-related skills. And the most recent World Economic Forum report identifies also for every second worker partially a substantial need for and upskilling. So the point is AI will lead, we can see three areas of tasks. One area of task is where AI and machines may simply replace human workers. Then there is another area of tasks where we need the unique human skills, and they have been mentioned today. It's creativity, it's entrepreneurship, it's innovative thinking, it's problem solving, it's contextual thinking, and all those skills. And then there is a middle area where we see that on the one hand, artificial intelligence could enhance the capabilities of human workers, and on the other hand, this artificial intelligence needs to be developed and trained to become a powerful tool. And so if we think about reskilling and skills and skills gaps, we must not only think in terms of this middle area where we skill specialists, but we will also have to think about the very, very specific skills where human beings outperform artificial intelligent machines, and where we need to train the future workforce, particularly also in those areas. So we are currently working on specific recommendations for the European Commission, and I cannot talk a lot about the specific recommendations, but there is agreement on that. First of all, that we need to address all stakeholders. That means education is a member state competency or even regional competency in many areas, but it will be not sufficient to leave the topic to the member states. So we need to have European initiatives there, and there are some very well received and good initiatives out there already. The other thing is we need to include, this cannot be shouldered by public institutions alone. So we need industry here, because the huge upskilling and reskilling effort that has to be managed within the next 4 years cannot be done solely by public education systems. So we need private industry investment here as well. And so what we see is that we also have to have a long-term strategy where we need to set incentives to prepare the education systems on a long-term range to skill people in the areas where they outperform humans, like innovativeness, entrepreneurship, and so forth. And finally, we need to invest in not only developing but also attracting talent from even outside and not having too much brain drain. That means also that we, for instance, need to really put more and more, significant more efforts in attracting, for instance, women into the areas of science and technology and ICT. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
It looks like a huge challenge, a huge challenge. During your work with this high-level group, have you seen that some particular experiences in some European country or worldwide that seem to work? For example, because how do you train people for a new field? I mean, just think of schools. Who is going to train? In Italy, there are about 700,000 teachers. I mean, have you seen some experience that they say, oh, they got it, they're making it right?
And this is what I meant when I said that we need to have more or all stakeholders here in place. And that means we could think about, so another target group, by the way, we identified would be the educators themselves. So they need to get the right skills and tools to educate, for instance, citizens or children. So
have you found an example? I mean, Finland or somewhere else, or in Spain, there is a school, there is a region, there is an initiative that actually worked.
Yeah, actually there are plenty of interesting initiatives out there that work well. Like in Finland, since you mentioned it, they have MOOCs, so massive open online courses where they educate citizens, so not only students, where they educate the population on the principles of AI. There is the Montreal movement, which I find very interesting, which tries to integrate the citizens in public and open discourses to learn about AI, to raise their concerns and things like that. There is, by the EU, the Digital Competences for Citizens initiative, or the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition initiatives. So there is, in Vienna, we just recently had the long night of robots where the public is invited to go to universities and research institutes to meet the technology. We have collected a number of really interesting initiatives, and that need to be shared among the member state countries.
One last question. Do you think that these experiences, or this kind of experiences, will be up to the job in upskilling with the speed that is required? This morning, speed was very much discussed as being a crucial element in the European challenge. Do you think, or we do we need something more, something different?
Actually, I think we need to start right now. If you think about the time frame when we want to change educational systems, they will be effective in 10 to 15 years. So we need to get started now to have those in place in 10 to 15 years. And this is the reason why we need, for instance, community colleges to educate people, but we also need the private industry offering now, in coalition with universities and public education, offering upskilling initiatives and trainings so that we can get started now.
Thank you very much. Cecilia BONEFELD-DAHL, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is the Director General of Digital Europe, the Association for the Digital Technology Industry in Europe. Can you give us an overview of the areas in which Europeans are going to meet artificial intelligence-based decision soon?
Well, I would say nearly everywhere. We have to remember that, AI is a tool, right? It's a methodology on how to use data, and it's nothing that kind of dropped down from the sky and all of a sudden, boom, there it was AI. It has been developing over years and years, and now, we wake up and we say, oops, while this is a new area, but it's also an area where we have a lot of expertise. We have been developing standards for technologies for a long, long time with a lot of success in Europe, and I think the first question is, what does it really demand to gain the trust and to kind of not scare people, right? And to answer that question, I would mention 3 C's. Mm-hmm. One thing is clear leadership, right? Clear leadership in the way that what do we want with AI? We can actually decide what we want with it. Of course, we will always have red lines and criminals, and of course, that is an area where we need to handle it as crime and all that. But if we look at AI, what do we want? Do we want, for example, preventive care instead of treatment? So is it a citizen's right, basically, to have care before you get sick instead of being in a hospital when you are sick? Do we want to get a greener environment? We can do a lot with AI today. We can control how we use energy in a building. So when people leave, everything is shut down, so we optimize, which means that we pollute less. Do we want a more efficient transportation system? So I would say the first thing Europe needs to do, and we normally are quite good at this, so if we want to talk about ethics and all that, first we need to know where we're going. And I would say there are some strength positions that are pretty obvious, right? We have a very strong public sector. We have high care systems and high protective systems of our citizens. So everything that has to do with health, safety, transportation, public services, should be some of the areas where we look at it first. I think that is basically a government and also, of course, a EU goal of basically taking that role really serious. And then, of course, we have private sector areas where we are quite good. Again, green energy, manufacturing, health. So what do we want with it? And then remember that, of course, there is a tier layered. There is like simple AI that will redirect your call depending on your need or where you are. And then there are super, super complex decisions on life and death, and really try to tier it up in different risk models and have different approaches for the different layers. The second C I would like to define is the competence, which we just talked about. I strongly believe that people gain trust when they have knowledge, which means that competence is number 1, 2, 3, and 4 in what we need to do with AI. We need to enable, the ordinary citizens or our younger generation to create AI and to use it as a tool. So we can basically get on forefront. If we solve that problem, we will solve the trust problem because we empower people, and we will solve the competitiveness problem, and we will solve, the investment problem that we have. The EU has now, of course, made the Digital Europe program where there's a lot of funds for AI, a lot of funds compared to the other, maybe regions not, but at least it's a try. It should be more, even more, if it was up to us. We definitely see that that is a key initiative where it's really targeted towards AIs and not and digital skills in general. And the last thing is the culture. I mean, if you look at our culture, we think about ethics, we think about values, European values, super, super important, but what does it actually mean? And again, of course, we need to look at the whole data economy, but what is specific to AI? I would say the specifics to AI is that it can learn by itself. I mean, the rest we've tried before. It's technology, data in, data out. But here, can we track that what went in, of course, in risk cases, not necessarily simple stuff, but what went in, this is, the chain of action, this data was used, it was handled this way, this was the output, and what was the intent? Does this algorithm or does this product actually act, 2 years later as it was supposed to do because it learned by itself and it got wiser? Hopefully, we will have a standard that teaches it to be even more careful on the intent of what it was supposed to do. And therefore, like a person, the older you get, I mean, knock on wood, the wiser you get, the more experienced you can take decisions. This is the specifics on AI. And then, of course, there are a lot of related areas of regulatory things, but this is more on the whole data economy.
Yeah, you talk about responsibility. How do people know that artificial intelligence was part of a decision? And who is going to be held accountable for AI-based decisions in the public and in private sector? I think that, is anyone working on this
Yes,
issues?
of course we're discussing, should there be like information, there is a machine behind some of these decisions. I mean, I think if every time we take a plane, we don't go to the pilot and say, okay, if we get into stormy weather, can you tell me how the algorithm works that I direct you to a different layer? Because I would like to know that, because, I mean, I have to count on the guy who knows it and that the algorithm is right. If not, I'm in trouble, right? So again, how did we manage to get into that space where we actually trust the pilot together with the algorithm will solve the thing? We created standards, right? So on these critical areas, industry basically created safety standards so to make sure that things doesn't go wrong. And this is a long transition that we have had through common collaboration between governments and industry, because nobody has an interest. Let's be real. I mean, there is neither industry or government or anybody wants things to go wrong. We want to make it right? So I think we should really use our collaborative ability in Europe to create those standards for the critical areas together, and then there will be areas where we don't really care to know it's just another tool of automation. Yeah.
So we're in for a lot of experimentations, and maybe it will be even a rough ride into the future with AI. I was an AI researcher once explained to me what is going to happen when we'll have quantum computers using AI algorithm. We will not going to know how exactly the decision was made. So we're going to have a huge challenge. But before that, we'll have to make sure that the European AI solutions do work. They make money. They help develop businesses, and they can actually be competitive with their US and Chinese counterparts. And so I want to ask Mario Sullivan.
May I just comment on one thing?
Yes.
remember one thing. With technology, we actually have the opportunity of defining standards. The discrimination, for example, or the lack of understanding how people make decisions, we can never solve.
That's a big question mark. Barry Sullivan, University College Cork. He's a research scientist, an AI consultant, so you're more into the business of business. So in order to develop competitive solutions, we need to have competitive talents. Where are we now at the high level talents needed to stay at the top of the game?
Where are we in terms of talent? Well, I think, so I guess, first of all, I'm an academic rather than a consultant, but I wish. So I suppose in terms of talents, Europe has a lot to be proud of. You know, if you look at some of the biggest AI companies in the world, and the Googles and the Facebooks and the Baidus and so on, you know, the very top executives are often Europeans. You know, if you look at Udacity, you know, Tesla, you know, these are often companies that are led by Europeans, you know, who've gone, you know,
deep
abroad to, you know, to do this kind of thing. So I guess we have a huge diaspora in AI across the world. I think locally, I'm not sure if people realize, but Europe educates far more PhD students than the United States does. I think by a factor of 2, if I'm not wrong. So we have a huge talent pool in Europe that we need to exploit and benefit from. And I think some of the challenges here are how do you retain that kind of talent? And I think when you hear, you know, numbers like Mr. Rohana gave us at the beginning, when Europe is going to be spending 500 million per year for the next number of years and then rising to 20 billion per year from 2020, that's going to create an enormous, if you just think about how you could possibly spend that kind of money, the level of activity in Europe is going to be totally transformed, you know. So I think it's a very exciting time. Of course there's a skills gap, as you mentioned earlier, there is everywhere. There isn't anywhere in the world where there's a surplus of AI researchers, right? So it's a problem that we face across the world, but we have to be agile and think in new ways about how we upskill and develop talent.
You mentioned the kind of AI European diaspora of top talents. China's been very successful in bringing talent back to their homeland. Do you think that this should be a policy aimed at getting top scientists to come back to Europe? Do you think it should be part of a European strategy?
Of course it should, and I think that's happening, right? We are having top European talents coming back to Europe, but of course, you know, we shouldn't be. I don't think we should be overly concerned about that. You know, we can create incentives for startups. We can create interesting positions. You know, we can fund interesting research programs, and so there's lots of things we can do there. And I suppose you know, we are focusing on some of these policy recommendations within the high-level expert group. But of course, you know, there are differences. I suppose the unique thing in Europe, as some of my colleagues here have said, is that in Europe, I suppose, we want to take a different ethical approach. We want to take this human-centered approach. And so this is as much non-technical as it is technical, because we need to educate people in ethics. We need to educate people in the impact of technology on society. We need to, lawyers need to be aware of what the sort of legal regulations and what the law, you know, covers here. So there's lots of things we have to get right in this sort of European way. And I think what we really need to be doing is educating a whole plethora of people, both technical and non-technical. We need to educate entrepreneurs on how to use this technology. As Cecilia says, you know, when she flies an airplane, she doesn't interview the pilot as to how the thing works, because you know, there are processes. We understand that the processes for creating the airplane have, you know, set at a particular standard. And so we need to think of that. We need to, I suppose, create AI systems that are managed in the same way, that we can stand over them. And of course, what this means for education and talent development is very unique.
But could we, and how, turn this ethical edge into a competitive edge on the marketplace?
Well, yes. Just I suppose specifically on ethics, I'm not a trained ethicist. So, but I suppose the first thing is that there's often talk in Europe about ethics being part of our brand, and I suppose it's important that we don't treat ethics is not a brand. It's an expectation that we all have of our systems, right? So I think the competitive edge here is that in Europe, if we can develop the most ethical AI systems that uphold the highest ethical standards, that are built with the appropriate intent and that are managed in the right way, I think that's something that isn't actually, well, it is a competitive edge, but it's something that simply European citizens expect. We have to produce systems like that, right? So and it's complex because when in dealing with ethics in this area, I suppose one of the big questions that I always ask is, AI is used for so many different things these days. There's, almost every possible decision you can imagine can be automated with AI. But just because we can do that, the question is, should we? So for every problem out there, there are lots of interesting examples where, you read research papers or how deep learning is applied to some data set to predict whether or not somebody, to predict the sexual orientation of somebody. Like, the question that should be asked before you even do that kind of work is, well, why are we doing it? What is the intent? And is this something that just because, yes, we know we can do it, but should we? Is that in some sense, a positive step forward? And I think these are very subtle questions that most technical people, God bless us, we're not trained really properly to evaluate. So this is so I suppose the whole question of ethics and AI and skills, as we started discussing, I think one unique thing about the field of artificial intelligence is that it brings so many different disciplines together, and I think it does so today in a way that very few other forms of technology do.
Thank you very much. Peter Schramek, is that correct? Great. Can I start by asking you the same question? You're more business-oriented. You had a long career in the IT business. How do you think that Europe could get its competitive edge in this area?
So, due to my entrepreneur's career, I'm mostly focused on startups. I understand startup as maybe the unique and fastest way how to do the innovation, which is exactly what we need now in AI. So I worked and evaluated about 200 AI startups from around the world. And I think that the problem of competitiveness is not in existing European startups, but in the dramatic difference in the number of AI startups in Europe in comparison to Asia or USA, or as well as the small size of European AI startup ecosystem.
Why is that?
Maybe, first of all, we need to have a correct understanding of what AI startup is. AI is not a product. There needs to be an existing problem which then gets solved using AI. And this solution is then sold to the market. So an AI startup should be understood more as a company focused on specific industry than just an AI company. Secondly, there are no country borders when it comes to AI-based solutions. The technological progress is so rapid and open that any solution automatically competes with similar solutions all over the world. We need to avoid European-centered market focus. The only market is global. Furthermore, we are just at the beginning. There are hundreds of thousands of opportunities to solve niche problems using AI. And European startups need to be focused on industries and solutions most relevant to European companies, either historically in established industries or in terms of current needs and traction. So a strong cooperation with enterprises is essential. But Europe is definitely lagging behind in a number of AI startups as well as their funding. The half of all global investment in 2017 into AI startups ended up in China. Even in Israel, a relatively small country, there are more AI startups in which much more venture capital is invested than in the entire EU. So what are the major issues? Lack of AI infrastructure in a form of well-funded research centers surrounded by startup incubators to support entrepreneurship and allow them to compete to each other. Second, the municipal administrations are passive in comparison with China or USA, especially in terms of funding local activities. And third, lack of tax incentives for AI employment and preferential visa policies. Solving these issues could help create a more supportive innovation ecosystem, but we need to solve it now. Thank you.
Thank you. I was very impressed by the data about Israel having more startups and more venture capital and AI than the whole of Europe. Don't you think it's also a question of culture? Culture has never been mentioned today. It's a question for all of you. Don't you think that Europe needs a different cultural approach to innovation and entrepreneurship, which is another word that was seldom used today, in developing? After all, if we see both the US and the Chinese experience, and you mentioned startups too, it's new companies that provide the bulk of new solutions and new developments. Barry.
Yeah, I suppose, of course, there's a fundamental difference between Europe and places like China, the US, and Israel, and that is, the diversity in Europe is huge, right? There are, 28 member states, many languages, many cultural differences. So we're much more heterogeneous than those other countries. I suppose one interesting thing that's going to happen in the next few months, unfortunately, is that probably we will lose the UK through Brexit, and in doing so, we will lose probably one of the world's top hubs for AI startups, and I think that's going to be a huge loss, obviously, and of course there's many other issues. But I think culturally we do need to do something different. But of course,
for example, what do you think is missing?
Well, I think. I'm not sure. I'm not sure something is missing. I think there is just a difference. If you look at the US, not generalizing much, but the US attitude is build it and we'll fix it later, right? So it's whereas in Europe we tend to be much more reflective about how our technologies impact citizens. We have a complex regulatory environment. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just a fact of it's just how it is. So there are significant structural differences, but I think these will stand in our favor in the long term, because if you look at, for example, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is a piece of AI legislation, to be honest, it's about the use of data and so on. Then I think we're putting all of the right building blocks in place for Europe to run the long race, so to speak.
Thank you. Any other?
Yes, I just want to add what Barry just said. We hear a lot of phrases like we are lagging behind the United States and we're lagging behind China. In the Netherlands, people are saying we're becoming a colony, an AI colony of China and of the United States. But I really want to make a point here. We must not forget that here in Europe, we are 500 million potential consumers. All the products, all the AI products that come from China and from the United States, they will want to sell them here. If we set the right framework, they will have to apply to that. Their systems will have to apply to that. Just as Barry said about the GDPR, the whole world is now talking about the GDPR, and companies are applying it within Europe and beyond. Parts of the United States, I think California is thinking of similar kinds of privacy protection. We have a strong position here, and we need not forget that and only go with the phrase, we are lagging behind and we are becoming a colony of the other parts of the world.
So in other words, you think we should leapfrog to a second phase of technology development that is inherently more sustainable, more resistant to scandals and like the Facebook scandal, things like that.
Exactly. I mean, the example of course, the Cambridge Analytica example is famous, but you also have the example of Amazon that had to withdraw its own recruitment tool because it was biased against women. I mean, that is what Barry said. We just throw it out there and we fix it later. But these are two important tools to throw out there and fix later. So I think that the approach that Europe is choosing, well, I'm convinced that in the long run is the better one.
As citizens, I'm sure of that. I hope it will happen fast enough for our European business to develop in the right size. But in GATELLIER, AI is a business that both in the US and China favors concentration. The more data, the better solution we can find. Well, we've seen time and again that Europe is fragmented. So how can we is it possible to turn this European diversity into a plus, into a strength? And what should be done to...
First of all, when we talk about data, we tend to talk about massive amount of data collected by the largest world company for some very specific purposes. It doesn't represent all the data, it doesn't represent all the systems. Previously, there was, Mr. Rana spoke about the public sector data, and this is a vast amount of data where people are starting, where organizations are starting to think how they can use it in a safe way and respecting what we call the European value, which we should name from time to time, which is fairness, which is transparency, which is neutrality, etc., etc. So all these data exist. They have to be provided the right way, with the correct anonymation, with the correct aggregations. And what we are doing in various sectors in Europe today is building platforms, many platforms in many places, domains platforms, technological platforms. And one of the ways to share this data is to make these platforms to talk together, to exchange more seamlessly the data together. And once you start the trend, it is a chicken and egg topic, but once you start the trend, it will be something that we can possibly achieve much more easily in Europe, taking into account this regulation and this capacity we have to follow regulation rather than in other places.
Who should develop these new platforms? The public sector, the private sector?
So, of course, we are going to set up one very specific platforms within the context of the Commission AI on Demand platforms, and I will be coordinating this. This platform will act as an aggregator and interconnection with various other platforms. We talked during the presentation about the DIH, the 4 DIH Digital Innovation Hub new project, and we will interconnect the AI4EU platform with these 4 platforms. We will also interconnect them with various other platforms, like the Human Brain platform, like the Copernicus platform, in which there is terabytes of data for Earth observation, agriculture, climate, etc. And this will set up a trend where we believe that it will make easier the access to data, more seamless, and applying AI on this data should become more and more easy.
Thank you. So now I have just one question from the Slido application. Are there any more? Because about half hour ago there were a number of questions, but I have only one. Is it correct? I'm asking at the desk behind you, where they manage the question. Anyway, this is the question we have from the audience. How should we tax artificial intelligence when it acts as part of an economic value chain?
I mean, how should we tax AI? Do we need to tax differently just because of AI? We can discuss the whole digital economy in general and, where is the value created. That is being discussed right now, hopefully, knock on wood, in OECD also going forward. But if we look at artificial intelligence, I mean, right now, I think the assumption behind that question is that job will disappear. And I just want to kill that assumption. The latest research that we've done shows that for each job that will disappear, like always in technology evolutions, jobs will be replaced, shows that for each job that disappears, 3.7 jobs will occur. We will have a massive lack of qualified labor. A massive lack of qualified labor. So jobs will be no problem. There would be one question. Will those jobs be in Europe or in China or in India because they have better digital skills than we do? And that takes me back to your argument. I mean, on the trust issue, on the empowerment issue, on the competitive issues, let's not go into the move where we just say, let's be protectionistic and, we are scared. There's so many opportunities. There would be plenty of jobs. It's a huge growth opportunity. All research shows that we will have increased activity. So we will be able to do more, have even more choices. So there is no research showing that we will lose jobs. It will be different jobs. So we should be focused at asking ourselves a different question. How do we invest enough in reskilling? One of the things that this research also shows is that we can actually predict through AI, pretty cool. If you have this job in a certain industry, what are the 3 jobs that you're most likely to be reskilled to from this job? And that's where we should focus. Because once we go to the citizens and we say, okay, you are a technical engineer handling a robot, the next thing you will do is one of the 3, and here is your path within the next 5 years or 3 years or whatever to go to that job. And we can do that with AI. So taking me back to my first point, what do we want with AI? Let's stop discussing what we don't want to happen. And let's start looking at the opportunities, what we want as Europeans, obligated to actually take our citizens into the next digital age and do something like that. Let's use AI to predict the upcoming jobs, because there will be plenty.
Barry.
Yeah, I think just on the tax question, I think it raises a whole plethora of questions, and I think around AI, and I think there's 2 things we should really think about with AI. One is, it's a fantastic technology, so how do we maximize the extent to which we accrue the benefits from that technology? So that is all sorts of incentives. How do we create a startup ecosystem? How do we mobilize this 20 billion per annum that Mr. Rohan mentioned, while simultaneously minimizing the risks? And I think we shouldn't get caught up on specific details, around whether or not we should be regulating in a particular way yet, because there's a challenge here, which is how do we ensure that Europe can actually maximize the extent to which it grows the AI industry, it accumulates the benefits, while of course respecting all of the ethical issues that we must, and all of the legal frameworks and everything else. But I think we should just ask ourselves 2 questions. How are we going to maximize the upsides, and how are we going to minimize the risks?
Thank you. We have more questions. The most popular questions has something to do with the USA and China. Who in Europe will be the worldwide powerhouse? If we will, The whole question is, will we give away AI technology to the USA or China as we normally do, or if not, who in Europe will be the worldwide powerhouse? Is there some emerging, either product sector or the research sector?
Well, so I suppose who knows, right? Because this industry is so fast-moving that you know, who knows what's going to happen in the next 3 years. But I think we need to. One strange thing about AI is that I travel a lot. I meet lots of government officials from all over the world. Every government oddly seems to think that they're lagging behind in AI. I've actually never met any government official who says we're doing extremely well on AI. You know, so everybody thinks they're lagging behind, which is you know, they see additional upsides. And of course, we live in a globalized world, so we can't be in any way protectionist. So what we have to do is create the greatest environment and ecosystem that we can for people to succeed. Bring people back, you know, create massive opportunities for investment, upskill people, get them interested in the right jobs. So these are the kinds of things that we should be doing. But you know, like AI is a technology, and you know, dare I say it, it's just a technology, right? So let's not run away with it.
Kathleen wants to answer.
Yes, I just.
Do you know what the next powerhouse in Europe is going to be?
No, I just wanted to say something about the previous question, if I may. I fully agree that we should focus on reskilling our workforce. But I am a little more nuanced than Cecilia about the jobs. I don't think that we know how many jobs we are about to lose or to gain. I have seen studies that range from 9% job loss to 50% to 100% to indeed a large number of new jobs. So what I think is that, yet we talk about basic income and we talk about taxing AI. I think that is not the right question to ask right now. I think the right question to ask is, how do we make sure that AI systems land well in the workplace? If I go back to that judge, for example, that I told about in the beginning, what made this judge trust an algorithm over his own judgment? The algorithm didn't go to law school. That is a question that we need to ask. What happened there? Was it sold to him as perfect? Was he not allowed to deviate from the decision by the algorithm? How do we make sure that this lands well in the workplace, that people keep their autonomy, that people keep a certain amount of pleasure in their jobs, and that these systems improve jobs rather than replace them?
There is something that was mentioned, I think by Sabine at the beginning, some time ago, about the fact that in order to use AI solutions, you need to develop other skills so they complement with the skills of AI. And so maybe that's something that maybe should be developed a bit in this context. How do you train people to work with AI and to work also with robotics, which is quite prominent in the questions that come from the audience. Who wants to develop a bit on these other skills? There is a wonderful book a few years ago was published. It was called "Humans Are Underrated." That means whose thesis was that we will not need so many people skilled in AI, rather than people skilled in all the other skills that complement AI technology. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree, and let's put it that way. I think there are two major areas. One area is where we are in hybrid work settings. That means, and that is a little bit tricky because we haven't talked about that. You can use AI and to augment the capabilities of people, which also could mean that you de-skill them, right? If you think about using a navigation system, we might lose the competences to drive around in cities by ourselves because we rely on the technology. So that's a tricky thing to use technology to augment the capabilities. So, but we can use them to truly augment capabilities and come to really higher efficiency in the work processes. So those are very specific skills we need to deal with artificial intelligence systems. Another set of skills is we need to build them. So we need AI specialists that are trained, as Barry said already, in humanities and ethics in order to build good AI systems. So we need hybrid qualification systems. We need to get the curricula right. And then what is forgotten, and this is the important point, I also think, and that's a cultural issue, our education systems are built for workers in the second and then the third industrial revolution. We are now in the fourth revolution. We need people who are able to work autonomously on problems and very complex problems. We need to train them in those skills where humans outperform every system we know so far. And I think that's an issue because our education systems are much more, I use the words of Foucault, in disciplining people into industrialized society instead of training them to be autonomous, self-contained, and
We have a very interesting question. It's relevant for the ethical issues we've been discussing, which is this. Our lives depend on the ethics of strangers, and most of us are strangers to others. Should the EU work and adopt a technologist oath, the Hippocratic oath? Because in the end, we will never be as knowledgeable about these technologies as experts are. So there is a question of trust, as we trust our physician. So we'll have to trust somehow who develops and gives us these decision-making tools. What do you think about this idea of adopting a technologist oath?
May I answer that? Just in very. So I think that we have developed institutions that are what we would call institutionalized trust, and the Hippocratic Oath is one of institutionalized trust. And I think that our AI developers and engineers should be trained in a way that they feel and internalize high ethical standards that are not fixed per se, but that need to be adapted as we learn with developing the system. So I truly believe that this would be the right way to include ethics into our AI systems by ethically aligned design and responsible innovation initiatives.
Yeah, I support this idea of an AI Hippocratic Oath. I think it's a great idea. I think the challenge we have is that I suppose those who would take it, the technologists, so computer scientists, software developers, people like me, I'm not sure that we're fully aware of the impact that our interventions have on the world. So what I mean is, the science of how technology impacts human behavior is still a very new science. And so I think that whole issue around, for example, two things. If we look at the use of smartphone technology, and there's lots of people saying that these things have massive negative impacts on children, for example, and there's an equally large group that's saying that, well, that isn't true. And the challenge there, of course, is that because these technologies are so new, the longitudinal studies don't exist. And so there's a methodological challenge, which is, how do we develop a science around a field that moves so quickly every 6 months, And the other question is, how do we understand the impact of bias? And I don't mean I mean in addition to the kind of bias that Katalin mentioned, so data bias. Like just bias in natural language. There's a very fine piece of work by Professor Giovanni and others on deeply embedded biases in natural language, for example. So this is a bias that's very, very difficult to deal with. Bias is associated with training by watching interaction online. And so, we don't quite understand that. And so when it comes to a Hippocratic Oath, I think we all want to do good. But the question is, do we actually fully understand, in the same way as a doctor does, if I do this, this happens. You know, we don't yet understand that. And that's not to excuse technologies, it's a challenge that we have in this area.
The first article of the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. What would be, is the question for all of you, the AI equivalent of do no harm? Do not be biased? What?
That's not enough. Do not be biased. Do no harm is better, because bias is a form of harm. You put me on the spot here, and I took it. I wouldn't know. The equivalent, I'm not sure. The term that I use is human in command.
Human in command.
And that means that we stay in command in a technical sense, of course, of the system, but also in deciding if, when, and how we use the systems in our daily lives. It's not only, if we want an oath, it's not only for the developers, but it should also go for the users, for example. I don't know if that would be feasible, but for example, a Dutch bank is now considering or even taking up social media information from social media accounts to determine whether we are credit worthy. I don't know if that is the right way to go about this, and those are decisions that we should think twice of. Are we going to use it in this way? And that is what I mean by human in command. Maybe that should be, or could be, a new phrase.
Another proposal?
I would say I agree with you. I mean, human in command, I'm not sure that a human should always be in command. I think that humans are extremely biased. So if we have any way of actually cleaning out the systems and doing standards so we don't have bias, let's fight our own nature in biases. I do agree with you that we have, I mean, only through this rapid change that we're going through. I mean, each time, look at the washing machine. There was discussion, you know, we will change the role of the woman. We would de-skill her washing skills, right? I mean, you gave her the stove. I mean, this woman, she's losing all her female skills of cooking. I mean, how can you take this away? This is fundamental women's skills. So each time we change technology, we have these value-based discussions because we're changing our roles, and we don't like that. We like what we know. But we have to remember that in this panel, I don't think there's anybody under 30, 40, and we are creating the future of our children, which are not a part of these discussions because they don't have the right skills to be actually in the discussions. And their future will really be so different. So I would say intent, to make sure that we have on important stuff. Let's not try to control everything but on important stuff that we stay in transparency to examine intent.
Quickly for me.
Intent and discussion.
Yeah, so quickly for me, the AI Hippocratic Oath would have to have two dimensions to it. And I'll summarize it by saying it's maximize upside and minimize risk. And the reason I say that is because one of the unique things about AI, which puts a moral obligation on us, is that it has the potential to do enormous good. It has the potential to have massive positive societal impact, massive commercial impact. So we should be active around ensuring that the world is a better place as a consequence of AI, while simultaneously ensuring that the risks associated with AI are minimized. And this is everything from ethics to negative impact on society and all these things. So for me, it's got those two dimensions, maximizing upside and minimizing risk.
Any other proposals? We have 5 minutes late, but I think the discussion was well worth the delay, and that was and will be, hopefully, the European way. Thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you to all of you.